The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting irregular shadows across the metallic floor of Space Station R7. Jackson Warren didn't look up from his work. He'd grown accustomed to the station's aging infrastructure, its constant complaints of neglect merely background noise to his focused mind. His hands moved with practiced precision, attaching wires and replacing components beneath the hull of a battered cargo vessel that had seen better days. Like the ship, Jackson himself bore the marks of time, a jagged scar running from his left temple to his jawline, calloused hands stained with engine grease that no amount of scrubbing could fully remove, and eyes that had witnessed too much during his years as a mercenary. Now, at 42, he preferred the company of machines to people. Machines were predictable. They didn't ask questions or expect conversation. Fix the problem, collect payment, retreat to his quarters. This was the routine that had governed his existence for the past 3 years since retiring from combat. The cavernous hangar bay was nearly empty at this hour. Most of our Seven's inhabitants were either sleeping or crowding the station's few entertainment venues. Jackson preferred working during these quiet hours, when interruptions were minimal and his thoughts could wander freely. Lately, those thoughts had been troubling him. Fragmented memories that refused to connect, persistent dreams of places he couldn't recall visiting, and an inexplicable sensation that something vital was missing from his life. He wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, leaving another streak of grease across his forehead. 3 more power couplings needed replacing before he could test the ship's electrical systems. As he reached for another component, a strange silence fell over the hangar. Not just quietness, but a complete absence of sound, as if someone had suddenly muted the universe. Jackson froze, the hair on his arms rising. Years of combat had honed his survival instincts, and every one of them now screamed danger. Slowly, he slid from beneath the ship and turned toward the hangar entrance. Standing, there was a figure unlike any he'd seen on R7 before. Tall and slender, clothed in an iridescent bodysuit that seemed to shift colors with each subtle movement. She, for the figure was unmistakably feminine, stood perfectly still, watching him. Her skin possessed a bluish-purple hue that caught the flickering lights, creating an ethereal glow around her form. But it was her eyes that truly captured Jackson's attention. Large, almond-shaped, and containing depths that reminded him of Earth's oceans, a sight he hadn't witnessed in over a decade. "Can I help you?" Jackson's voice emerged rougher than intended, his social skills dulled from disuse. The figure moved forward with a fluid grace that seemed almost supernatural. Her head was adorned with what appeared to be a crystalline crest rather than hair, catching and refracting light in dazzling patterns. As she approached, Jackson felt an inexplicable flutter in his chest. Recognition, fear, or something else entirely, he couldn't determine. When she spoke, her voice was melodic, carrying the quality of a perfectly tuned instrument. "Do you remember me, human? I was the girl you shared a bed with years ago." Jackson blinked, his mind racing through a catalog of memories, but finding nothing that matched this extraordinary being before him. "I think you've confused me with someone else. I'd remember someone like you." A sad smile crossed her face, revealing teeth that glinted like polished opals. "No, Jackson Warren. You wouldn't remember because your memories were taken from you, as were mine until recently." Jackson took a step back, his hand instinctively moving toward the plasma cutter on his tool belt. Not exactly a weapon, but better than nothing. "How do you know my name?" "I know many things about you. Your favorite meal is scent steak with root vegetables, though you complain it never tastes like the real thing. You have a recurring nightmare about the Proxima Centauri campaign, specifically the ambush at New Singapore Colony. And you have a small scar behind your right ear from when you fell from a tree as a child." Each word struck Jackson like a physical blow. The details were too specific, too personal to be mere research. The stranger knew things he'd never discussed with anyone on R7. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Zora. 6 years ago, we spent 3 months together on the colony world of Andera. We were," she paused, searching for the right word, "intimate. And then I was forced to erase both our memories of that time to protect us both." Jackson's heart hammered against his ribs. That's impossible. I've never been to Andera. I was stationed on Titan's military base 6 years ago. No, Zora said gently. That's what you were made to believe. The military records were altered. A flash of something, a feeling, not quite a memory, surged through Jackson. A scent like exotic flowers, laughter in darkness, the sensation of fingers tracing patterns on his skin. He shook his head violently, dispelling the fragment before it could form into anything coherent. Why should I believe any of this? He growled, though a part of him already sensed truth in her words. Zora stepped closer, now just an arm's length away. Because deep down, you feel it too. The gaps in your timeline, the dreams that don't make sense. The reason you've isolated yourself from human connection, because subconsciously, you know something vital was taken from you. Jackson swallowed hard. She was right about the dreams, about the nagging feeling that his memories had holes where experiences should be. But accepting her explanation meant acknowledging that his entire reality might be built on fabrication. What do you want from me? He asked, his defenses still firmly in place despite the doubt now creeping into his mind. I need your help, Zora replied, her voice dropping to a near whisper. And you need answers. The empire I once served is planning something terrible, and it involves Earth. The memories we lost are connected to all of it. Empire? Jackson echoed, his skepticism battling with curiosity. The Azrathi Empire, a civilization that spans 17 star systems. I was one of their observers, sent to gather intelligence on potential conquest targets, including humanity. The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on Jackson. Here he was, covered in engine grease in a decrepit hangar, being told he'd once been intimate with an alien spy. Yet something prevented him from dismissing her outright. Let's say I believe you had a reason to erase my memories. Why come back now? Why not leave me in blissful ignorance? Zora's expression grew grave. Because the Empire has discovered something on Earth, something ancient and powerful. If they obtain it, countless worlds will fall, including this one. You and I once found a way to stop them, but we were discovered. I had to hide what we knew inside both our minds and separate us to keep the information safe. She raised her hand slowly, making sure Jackson could track her movement, and gently pressed her fingertips against his forehead. The touch sent an electric sensation through his body, a jolt that seemed to awaken dormant neural pathways. Within you are memories that hold the key, she murmured. If you want to know the truth about us, about what's at stake, come with me tonight. I have a ship docked in the auxiliary bay. We leave at midnight station time. Jackson stood frozen, conflicted between rational skepticism and a profound yearning to understand the empty spaces in his mind. Something about her presence felt right in a way he couldn't articulate, as if a missing piece of himself had suddenly returned. After a long moment, he gave a single, terse nod. I'll meet you there, but I'm bringing my own weapons, and if this turns out to be some elaborate con, you'll regret it. Zora's lips curved into a smile that was both sad and knowing. Fair enough. Pack light. We may not be returning. As she turned to leave, the hangar's ambient noise suddenly rushed back. The hum of life support systems, distant conversations, the mechanical ticking of cooling engines. The sensation was so jarring that Jackson wondered momentarily if he'd imagined the entire encounter. But the lingering warmth on his forehead and the business card-sized data chip she'd pressed into his palm were undeniable evidence. Glancing down at the chip, he saw coordinates and access codes for docking Base 17. Jackson returned to his work with mechanical motions, his mind elsewhere. By the time midnight approached, he had finished repairing the cargo ship, packed a small bag with essentials, and strapped his service pistol to his thigh. Despite every rational thought arguing against it, he found himself drawn toward the auxiliary bay like a man possessed. Something was pulling him toward Zora and the answers she promised. Answers about himself, about her, and about a threat that supposedly spanned galaxies. As he slipped through the dimly lit corridors of R7, avoiding security cameras with practiced ease, Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into the most significant moment of his life. Dock 17 appeared empty at first glance, but as Jackson approached, a shimmer in the air revealed the outline of a vessel unlike any he'd seen before. Its hull seemed to bend light around it. Not quite invisible, but difficult for the eye to focus on. The boarding ramp lowered silently as he approached. Zora waited at the top, her crystalline crest glowing faintly in the dim light. Last chance to change your mind, Jackson Warren. Jackson took a deep breath, his hand resting on his weapon. I need to know the truth, whatever it is. With those words, he stepped onto the ramp, leaving behind the predictable monotony of his life on R7 and heading toward a destiny he couldn't begin to fathom. Behind them, the first security alert began to sound. The ship, Zora called it the Whisper, moved with startling speed and silence. Jackson watched through the viewport as R7 shrank rapidly into the distance, security vessels scrambling but hopelessly outmatched by the Whisper's superior technology. Within minutes, they had breached the station's security perimeter and entered open space. They'll flag us as thieves or deserters, Jackson said, settling into the co-pilot's seat. The ship's interior was sparse but elegant, with controls that seemed to respond to touch, thought, and voice in equal measure. It won't matter soon, Zora replied, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. This ship's signature will be undetectable once we reach FTL speeds. Besides, where we're going, station authorities have no jurisdiction. Jackson studied her profile in the blue glow of the instruments. In the confined space of the cockpit, he was acutely aware of her alien nature. The way her skin seemed to pulse with subtle bioluminescence, the slight clicking sound when she spoke certain consonants, the fact that she never seemed to blink in the conventional human manner. Where exactly are we going? He asked. First, somewhere safe where I can begin to restore your memories. Then Earth. That's where the artifact is hidden. The ship's engines hummed, a sound more felt than heard, as they accelerated to faster-than-light travel. The stars outside blurred, then vanished altogether, replaced by the swirling colors of hyperspace. Why don't you start by telling me what you do remember? Jackson suggested, keeping his voice neutral despite the turmoil of emotions beneath the surface. Zora exhaled softly. 6 years ago, I was sent to Andera, a colony world on the edge of human space. My mission was simple: observe human expansion patterns, identify weaknesses, gather intelligence on military capabilities. The Azrathi Empire had identified humanity as a potential threat or opportunity, depending on one's perspective. She paused, checking something on the navigation system before continuing. You were there as a security consultant for the mining corporation that operated the main settlement. We met at a terraforming celebration. The colony had just achieved stage 2 atmosphere compatibility. Jackson frowned. He had no recollection of ever visiting Andera, let alone attending any celebration there. Yet as Zora spoke, he found himself able to visualize the scene she described. Biodomes under a purple sky, modular buildings arranged in concentric circles, the hum of atmospheric processors in the distance. We were drawn to each other immediately, Zora continued, her voice taking on a warmer tone. Interspecies relationships weren't common, but they weren't forbidden either. What began as curiosity evolved into something deeper. I found myself sharing things about my mission that I shouldn't have. You were suspicious at first, but then you began to help me understand the complexities of human society. If we were so close, Jackson interrupted, why would you erase my memories? Zora's expression darkened. Because I discovered something that changed everything. The Empire wasn't just gathering intelligence. They were preparing for full-scale invasion, starting with Earth. They had identified a source of power there, something ancient buried beneath the surface. I couldn't be complicit in the destruction of your world and dozens of others. She turned to face him fully. The Azrathi have a hive mind component to their consciousness. All observers are connected telepathically to the Overseer caste. If I had simply defected or warned you, they would have extracted the information from our mind. The only solution was to partition and hide the crucial information, half in my mind, half in yours, and then erase our conscious access to it. Jackson tried to process this revelation. So you're saying we're both carrying information that could stop an alien invasion, but neither of us can remember what it is. Precisely, Zora nodded. The Azrathi cannot extract what isn't consciously accessible. It was the perfect hiding place. But I implanted a trigger. If certain conditions were met, my memories would begin to return. 3 weeks ago, I received news that the Empire had launched the first phase of their Earth operation. My memories started surfacing, and I knew I had to find you. A warning light flashed on the console, momentarily distracting them both. Zora's fingers flew across the controls, making adjustments. We're being scanned, she explained. Probably just routine patrol, but we should minimize conversation until we're clear. They sat in tense silence for several minutes as Zora maneuvered the ship through what appeared to be a densely populated trade route. Jackson used the time to study the unfamiliar, star patterns, and try to orient himself in space. Once the danger had passed, Zora relaxed visibly. We're approaching a neutral outpost where we can rest and properly begin the memory retrieval process. It's operated by a species called the Vox. They have no allegiance to the Empire. How exactly do you plan to retrieve these memories? Jackson asked, unable to keep the skepticism from his voice. The Vox have technology that can stimulate neural pathways, bringing dormant memories to the surface. It's not perfect, and it will take time, but it's our best option. Jackson nodded slowly, still struggling to reconcile Zora's fantastic tale with his own reality. Yet there was something about her, about the way she spoke and moved, that resonated with him on an unconscious level. This is a lot to take in, he admitted. Yesterday, I was just a mechanic on a forgettable space station. Today I'm apparently crucial to stopping an alien invasion. A soft smile played across Zora's lips. Yesterday you were a mechanic who felt incomplete without knowing why. Today you're beginning to understand the reason. Jackson couldn't argue with that. Despite the absurdity of their situation, he felt more alive than he had in years. The emptiness that had plagued him, that sense of something vital missing from his existence, had begun to fill with purpose. The outpost appeared ahead of them, a sprawling collection of modules and docking arms extending from a central asteroid. Lights of various colors blinked across its surface, creating patterns that Jackson assumed must have significance to the Vox, whoever they were. Prepare for docking, Zora said, switching to a communication channel. She spoke in a language Jackson didn't recognize, a series of melodic tones and clicks that seemed impossible for human vocal cords to produce. After receiving clearance, she guided the ship into a berth near the outpost's core. As the engines powered down, she turned to Jackson with an expression of mingled hope and anxiety. Once we begin this process, there's no turning back, she warned. The memories may come with emotional attachments that were also suppressed. Are you prepared for that? Jackson considered her words carefully. The rational part of him still screamed that this was madness, that he should never have left R7. Yet a deeper instinct, one he had learned to trust during his years of combat, told him to proceed. I need to know, he said simply. Let's do this. Zora nodded, accessing a panel that revealed a small arsenal of weapons. She selected a sleek pistol for herself and offered Jackson a similar model. The Vox are peaceful, but other visitors to this outpost may not be. Stay close to me. As they exited the ship, Jackson was struck by the diversity of life, forms moving through the outpost corridors. Beings of all shapes, sizes, and apparent compositions bustled about their business, barely giving the human-alien pair a second glance. The air carried a blend of scents, some pleasant, others distinctly not, and the background noise was a cacophony of languages and communication methods. Zora led him confidently through this alien bazaar, occasionally exchanging greetings with passing entities. After several minutes of navigation through increasingly narrow passages, they arrived at a doorway marked with symbols that glowed with subtle phosphorescence. This is it, Zora said, placing her palm against the scanner. The Vox memory technicians. The door slid open to reveal a chamber that reminded Jackson of a medical facility, albeit one designed with a very different aesthetic sensibility. Crystal formations grew from the floor and ceiling, meeting in columns that pulsed with internal light. What appeared to be medical equipment was integrated seamlessly into these crystalline structures. A vox, at least Jackson assumed it was a vox, floated toward them. The being resembled a collection of translucent orbs arranged in a roughly humanoid configuration, constantly shifting and reorganizing while maintaining the overall shape. When it spoke, its voice seemed to emanate from all points of its body simultaneously. Zora of the Azrathi, it acknowledged, its voice harmonic and soothing. We received your transmission. The memory retrieval chamber is prepared. Thank you. Harmonizer, Zora replied with a respectful inclination of her head. This is Jackson Warren, the human I told you about. The Vox turned its attention to Jackson, several of its orbs rearranging to form what might have been eyes. Your species rarely ventures this far from your established territories. You honor us with your presence. Jackson nodded awkwardly, unsure of the proper protocol. Thank you for your help. Follow, please, the Vox directed, floating toward the rear of the chamber where two reclined seats waited, constructed from the same crystalline material as the rest of the room. Zora touched Jackson's arm gently. This process will not be painless, she warned. Suppressed memories often resurface with the emotions attached to them, but I'll be experiencing it alongside you. Jackson squared his shoulders. Iva endured verse. Perhaps, Zora said quietly, but pain of the mind can cut deeper than any physical wound. They settled into the chairs, which adjusted to their different physiologies. The Vox technician, the harmonizer, placed what looked like circlets of woven light around their foreheads. Your minds will merge during this process, the harmonizer explained. What one remembers, the other will experience. It is the only way to ensure the partitioned information becomes whole again. Before Jackson could ask further questions, the chamber darkened, and the crystals around them began to pulse with increasing intensity. A sensation like ice water flowing through his veins spread from the crown of his head downward, bringing with it a dizzying disorientation. Remain calm. The Vox's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Surrender to the memories as they come. The last thing Jackson saw before his conscious mind submerged was Zora's face, her alien features contorted in concentration or pain. He couldn't tell which. Then everything dissolved into a kaleidoscope of fragmented images and sensations. Asterisk a sunset on Andera, the sky painted in shades of lavender and crimson. Zora's hand in his, her skin cool against his human warmth. Asterisk. Asterisk the taste of unfamiliar fruit, sweet with an undertone of spice. Laughter shared over a meal in private quarters. Asterisk. Her crystalline crest glowing softly in darkness, illuminating their intertwined bodies. Asterisk urgent whispers. They cannot know what we've discovered. The artifact must remain hidden. Asterisk. A cavern deep beneath Earth's surface, ancient symbols carved into stone walls, pulsing with energy that predated human civilization. Asterisk Zora's face, tear-streaked. I must erase this from both our minds. It's the only way to keep it safe. Asterisk. Pain, sharp and invasive, as memories were categorized, partitioned, suppressed. Asterisk a final kiss, desperate and sorrowful. If the conditions are met, we will remember. We will find each other again. Asterisk. Jackson gasped as consciousness returned, his body trembling and covered in cold sweat. Beside him, Zora made a sound somewhere between a sob and a sigh, her crystalline crest flashing with chaotic patterns of light. Did you see? She whispered, her voice ragged. Did you remember? Jackson nodded, unable to speak immediately as the flood of recovered memories settled into place. They weren't complete, still fragmented and disjointed, but they were undeniably real. He remembered Andera now, remembered falling in love with the alien observer who had been sent to study his people as potential conquests. Most importantly, he remembered their discovery, ancient texts in a forgotten human archive that referenced a weapon of incredible power, hidden on Earth by civilization that had visited the planet millions of years before humans evolved. "The Nexus Key," he said hoarsely. "That's what the Empire is searching for. We found its location in those old manuscripts." Zora nodded, sitting up with visible effort. "Yes, and we encoded the exact coordinates in our partition memories. The Empire knows the general location, somewhere beneath the old city of Istanbul, but not the precise position or how to access it." The Vox harmonizer hovered nearby, its orbs pulsing with what might have been concern. "Your neural pathways show significant stress. Further memory retrieval should wait until you have rested." Jackson disagreed. "We don't have time. If the Empire is already mobilizing on Earth—" "The harmonizer is right," Zora interrupted. "We've recovered enough to proceed with our mission. We know where to go. The rest of the memories will surface gradually now that the process has begun." Reluctantly, Jackson agreed. They were led to private quarters, a small but comfortable room that continued the crystalline aesthetic of the medical chamber. As the door closed behind them, leaving them alone for the first time since their reunion, an awkward silence fell. The recovered memories had changed everything. Jackson now knew with certainty that Zora's story was true. They had indeed been lovers, conspirators united against the Empire's expansion. Yet those memories existed alongside 6 years of a life lived without her, creating a cognitive dissonance that left him feeling unbalanced. "This is strange," he finally said, stating the obvious. Zora smiled faintly. "Indeed, I remember loving you, yet I'm looking at essentially a stranger." "Same here." Jackson ran a hand through his short hair, noticing how Zora's eyes tracked the movement. "I have memories of us together, but they feel like someone else's experiences. They will integrate over time," she assured him. "The brain is remarkably adaptable, even to such unusual circumstances." Jackson sat on one of the 2 sleeping platforms, which seemed to be made of the same yielding crystal as everything else. "So what's our next move? Go directly to Earth?" Zora shook her head. "Not yet. There's a resistance movement we need to contact first. Beings from various worlds who oppose the Empire's expansion. They've established a base on Earth, operating in secret." "A resistance? How many species are involved in this conflict?" "More than you might imagine. The Azrathi Empire has been expanding for centuries, incorporating some civilizations and subjugating others. Earth is just their latest target, but potentially their most important because of the Nexus Key." Jackson processed this information, tried to reconcile it with humanity's understanding of their place in the universe. "So all this time, while we've been thinking we're alone in the galaxy, there's been an interstellar war going on? Not precisely a war, more of a cold conflict. The Empire prefers assimilation to destruction. They see themselves as bringing order to chaos, civilization to the primitive." Zora's tone made it clear what she thought of this perspective. "And what changed your mind?" Jackson asked, curious. "You were one of them, an observer for this empire. Why turn against your own people?" Zora was silent for a long moment, her crystalline crest dimming to a dull glow. "Partially it was you, experiencing humanity through close contact rather than clinical observation. But mostly it was learning the truth about the Empire's methods. They don't just conquer. They remake worlds in their image, erasing indigenous cultures and forcing conformity. When I discovered their plans for Earth, I couldn't be complicit any longer." Jackson nodded slowly. Another fragment of memory surfaced. Zora showing him classified Imperial documents, the 2 of them poring over the information in his quarters on Andera, horrified by what they discovered. "We should rest," Zora suggested, interrupting his thoughts. "The memory retrieval process is taxing, and we'll need our strength." She was right, Jackson realized. Despite the urgency of their situation, his body was demanding recovery time. "How long before we reach Earth?" 36 hours in your time measurement. The whisper is fast, but we need to take an indirect route to avoid Imperial patrols. They settled onto the separate sleeping platforms, an arm's length apart. Jackson found himself studying Zora's alien features in the dim light, trying to reconcile the stranger before him with the lover in his recovered memories. "Sleep well, Jackson Warren, Zora murmured, her large eyes closing halfway in what he now remembered was her species' version of slumber. You too, he replied, uncertain if he would be able to rest with his mind so full of conflicting timelines and fragmented memories. But exhaustion soon won out, drawing him into a deep sleep filled with dreams of Andera's purple skies and whispered conversations about secrets that could change the fate of worlds. When Jackson awoke, more memories had surfaced from the depths of his mind. He remembered specific details now. The location of the resistance base on Earth, a network of caverns beneath the Carpathian Mountains, the identities of key allies, and most importantly, the exact nature of the Nexus Key. Not a weapon in the conventional sense. The key was a device capable of manipulating quantum reality on a massive scale. In the right hands, it could create shields against invasion or generate unlimited clean energy. In the wrong hands, it could tear apart the fabric of space-time or be weaponized to subjugate entire star systems. Created by a long-vanished civilization known only as the Precursors, the key had been hidden on Earth as a safeguard, meant to be discovered only when humanity reached a certain technological threshold. The Empire had learned of its existence through intercepted communications and made acquiring it their primary objective. Zora was already awake, conversing quietly with the Vox Harmonizer when Jackson entered the main chamber of their quarters. Our ship has been refueled and provisioned, she informed him. We should depart within the hour. Jackson nodded, noting how much more comfortable he felt in her presence now. The memory retrieval process had begun to bridge the gap between his fractured identities, the lonely mechanic of R7 and the man who had fallen in love with an alien observer on Andera. I remembered more about the key, he said, accepting a container of what appeared to be food from the harmonizer. The contents looked like blue gel, but tasted surprisingly like cinnamon oatmeal. As did I, Zora replied. The Empire believes it's simply a weapon, but it's so much more. The Precursors designed it as a tool of creation, not destruction, which makes it all the more dangerous in Imperial hands, Jackson added. They finished their meal in contemplative silence before gathering their few possessions and returning to the Whisper. As they prepared for departure, Jackson felt a growing sense of purpose. Whatever doubts he'd harbored about Zora's story had been erased by the recovered memories. Now he was fully committed to their mission, not just to save Earth, but to thwart an empire that threatened countless worlds. The journey to Earth was tense, but uneventful. Zora guided the Whisper through regions of space that Jackson hadn't known existed, corridors of altered physics where faster-than-light travel was more efficient, zones where sensor technology was naturally disrupted by cosmic phenomena. More memories continued to surface as they traveled. Jackson remembered the day they had discovered the existence of the Nexus Key, finding ancient manuscripts in a forgotten archive on Andera, manuscripts that had been left there by precursor visitors millennia ago. He remembered the cold fear that had gripped them both when they realized what they had found and the desperate plan they had formulated to keep the information from the Empire. We're approaching Earth's solar system, Zora announced, drawing Jackson from his recollections. I'm detecting significant Imperial activity near Mars, likely a staging area for their Earth operations. Jackson studied the tactical display, impressed by the Whisper's long-range scanning capabilities. Can we avoid detection? Yes, but we'll need to power down all non-essential systems and use a gravitational slingshot around Jupiter to mask our approach. It will add 6 hours to our journey. Better than being intercepted, Jackson agreed. As they altered course, a comm signal suddenly broke through on an encrypted channel that the ship automatically accepted. A voice, human but distorted by static, came through the speakers. Zora of Andera, this is Sentinel. Confirm identity with recognition phrase. Zora's crystalline crest brightened with apparent relief. Starlight breaks on distant shores. Identity confirmed, the voice replied. We've tracked your approach. Imperial presence has increased tenfold in the past week. Recommend alternative landing coordinates. Understood, Zora responded. Transmit when ready. A series of numbers appeared on the navigation display. Coordinates for a location in the Balkan region of Earth. The Resistance has moved its main base, Zora explained to Jackson. Security protocol. Who was that? Jackson asked, straining to remember if the voice had been familiar. Commander Alexei Petrov, former Russian Special Forces, now leader of Earth's resistance cell. You'll remember him soon enough. The name triggered another memory cascade. A gruff, barrel-chested man with a scarred face and a booming laugh, sharing drinks with Jackson in an underground bunker while discussing strategy. I worked with him before, Jackson murmured. Before my memories were erased. Zora nodded. He was our primary contact on Earth. One of the few humans who knew about the Empire's existence before their advanced scouts arrived. They fell silent as the Whisper glided past Jupiter's massive bulk, using its gravitational field to mask their approach vector. Earth appeared on their view screen, the blue-green planet stirring a complex mix of emotions in Jackson. Though he had been born there, he had spent most of his adult life off-world, returning only occasionally. Now, seeing it threatened by an extraterrestrial empire, he felt a powerful surge of protectiveness. How do we prevent the Empire from tracking us on descent? He asked, focusing on practical matters. The Whisper has technology that can cloak our atmospheric entry, Zora replied. We'll appear as nothing more than a minor meteorological anomaly. Additionally, the Resistance has jammers in place around their territory. Hours later, they began their approach, the ship's outer hull heating as they entered Earth's atmosphere. Despite Zora's assurances about their cloaking technology, Jackson felt exposed and vulnerable during their descent, a feeling that intensified when alarm indicators suddenly flashed across the control panel. We're being scanned, Zora announced, her voice tense. Imperial technology, very focused. They may have anticipated our approach. Jackson's military training kicked in. Evasive maneuvers? Too late for that. Best to maintain course and rely on our countermeasures. The ship shuddered as they hit turbulence, dropping rapidly through cloud layers toward the mountainous terrain below. The scanning beam intensified, probing the Whisper's defenses. Defensive systems failing, Zora reported, her fingers flying over the controls. Prepare for emergency landing procedures. Jackson secured himself as the ship began a controlled descent that was rapidly becoming less controlled. Trees rushed up to meet them as Zora guided the Whisper into a small clearing. The landing rougher than intended, but not catastrophic. We need to move quickly, she said, already unstrapping herself. That scan came from an Imperial scout ship. They'll send ground forces to investigate. They grabbed their weapons and essential supplies, exiting the Whisper into the cool mountain air. Jackson took a moment to orient himself. Dense forest, mountainous terrain, the distant sound of running water. The Resistance base would be hidden somewhere in the caves that honeycombed these mountains. This way, Zora indicated, checking a device on her wrist. The base entrance is 3 kilometers southeast. They moved swiftly through the forest, Zora leading with an ease that suggested familiarity with the terrain. Jackson followed, alert for any sign of pursuit, his recovered military training meshing with the more recent skills he'd developed as a mechanic, an awareness of how things worked, how they could be broken.